The biggest station in the world, playing all of today's hits. You're listening to Instinct Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're now tuning into the very best. It's yours truly, Jazzy Fizzle, Fizzle, Fizzle. And this is Instinct Radio, man. Tune in, baby. Oh, boy.
Good evening, happy Monday. It's your boy Kevin Thornton. You are tuned in to the Wellness Architect Show. It is Monday, February 12th, 2018. This is my birthday celebration show, and I have the men's roundtable. Two of the guys are on their way. You know how they do. But I also have two special guests here today. So it's going to be a very impactful show. Ladies and gentlemen, those who are listening, especially the ladies, if you have a special man in your life, husband, child, brother, friend, please share this YouTube, Facebook Live so they can see it, because it's going to really impact them on all aspects of their lives today. So I want you to please share it. As you're watching now, please share it so they can see it. It's going to be very good. I have my boy here, Mr. Antonio Boyd. How you doing, sir?
Doing good, doing good. How's it going, man?
I can't complain, sir.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And we have two special guests. I'm gonna let the lady go first. Introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are again, and what do you do?
My name is Lotus Richey, and I work with people to help them to ignite the fire on the inside to live a freer and happier life on the outside through my life coaching and consulting business.
All right. And this man right here.
Hi, I'm Johnny Cusimano, and I work with Lotus. I'm one of the instructors for our program, Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, ASSIST for short.
Okay. Thank you for having me. So I want to start off first with suicide and depression. And I know you said you start off doing the kind of prevention and training in the Army.
That's correct.
So was suicide prevalent in the Army, and what were the two determining causes would cause them to want to commit suicide?
Over the last 10, 15 years, we've been at war.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that our guys are coming back with a lot of moral injuries as well as physical injuries and mental injuries. And they're finding particularly, I think you see a higher rate of suicide actually among our veterans.
Mm-hmm.
Those who are getting out and not adjusting well to being back.
Mm-hmm.
They also carry a lot of moral guilt about that they're maybe the ones who have survived or the ones who've come back and they weren't able to always protect their buddies.
Mm-hmm.
We're also seeing an uptick in just some of our soldiers who are brand new to the military but are coming already with relationship issues, for example. Just
Mhm.
as an example, that they move there thinking that they're going to have a partner or someone come with them, and it doesn't work out, and all of a sudden they're in a very different structure and they can't manage it. So it can happen for a wide variety of reasons. The military, what I loved about it was is the population was immense. I had white, African American, Hispanic, Filipino, Korean, everyone imaginable from around the world, and we had all these cultures colliding, from inner city folks to good old country folks, north, south, east, west, it didn't matter. So when it came to the suicide, one of the underlying themes was oftentimes was a sense of loneliness, sense of that I can't go on anymore, and a focus on past perception of failure. So I'll skim in a little bit more there.
There you go.
It happens to me too.
You too, huh?
Yeah, it happened to me before.
Okay. All right.
So when people commit suicide, how do you deal with the mindset that people have saying that it's a selfish act? So either one, anybody could talk about that.
Well, I think we really have to understand, like, we've talked about this before. Oftentimes, people utilize suicide because they may not have any other coping skills to deal with the circumstance that they're facing at that moment in time. And oftentimes I say suicide is a silent killer because many times people suffer in silence. And because of the guilt, depending upon what your cultural background is, if you're Catholic, like I said before, I grew up going to Catholic high school, Catholic grammar school. I was an altar girl. And the priest would tell us, if you kill yourself, God's not going to forgive you. So can you imagine a Catholic individual hearing that type of language, or even other religious cultures saying to their parishioners, if you suicide, God's not going to forgive you? So if you're saying that to someone, do you really think somebody's going to want to come to you and tell you, even though they might be reaching out for help, but they're not going to tell you because they don't want to be judged? So sometimes people feel that that's their only way out. And personally, having dealt with people who have had suicidal ideations and often who have suicided, I've lost a few people to suicide when I was much younger. And that's why I do this work, because I don't ever want to miss the signs again. And for me, I don't look at it as that they were selfish, but one of the people, they had an incurable disease. They didn't think of maybe another way out, and she was married, she had a family. I worked with her husband, I worked with her son. Then her husband suicided.
Wow.
I had another coworker. He was very much in love with his wife. She was having an affair. He had 2 lovely children, both daughters. He loved them immensely. He talked to me that day on the dock about it, and that weekend he went home and suicided. I was in my 20s then. I had no idea what the invitations to suicide looked like or sound like. But that Monday when I went to work, I felt the strain, I felt the loss, I felt the pain.
So how prevalent is it within the African American community and also men with suicide?
I think that it's very pervasive right now. As you know, I've been overseas for a number of years, living in Japan and traveling around the world as well. So it's pervasive globally. But when we bring it back home, if you look at the numbers, they're staggering. The United States spends millions of dollars each year in suicide-related cases. And as far as people of color, if you look at the numbers are soaring in our communities. And I've heard someone say about 2 weeks ago, before people of color, we really didn't hear much of us suiciding. But it's happening more and more now. And I think a lot of it has to do with some of the things that we're allowing our people to view on social media. And nothing against social media, but we have to use it wisely. And what bothers me more so than anything else right now is that our children, our babies, are suiciding now. And I recently did a video on my Facebook, and it highlights that. Our babies. We just had a 6-year-old suicide in Douglasville County a few months ago.
6-year-old.
A 6-year-old. When I came back from to the United States, pardon me, my cousin in New Jersey, she was had a schoolmate, which was her best friend. The little girl was 10 years old, and she suicided. So it's very real.
Wow.
And our children aren't being heard. I taught a communications class over in Japan, and this was primarily military children. And one of the things that the children said to me is, Miss Lotus, my mom and dad, they don't listen to me. And there's a section in that class that I teach. It says we have 2 ears so that we can hear twice as much as we speak. So we have to hear twice as much when our children, when our family, when our loved ones, when our coworkers are speaking to us, devoid of our ethnicity. We have to hear.
So how do you know when they're trying to reach out to you and let you know that they're thinking about suicide? They're not gonna actually tell you, but they let you know. How you know? What's the signs?
I think you look for the same signs that you would when you see someone who's just sad or upset or that something's bothering them. they're all indicators, but it's all individualized. So, for example, what might be the tipping point for me may just register as a blimp for you. So we're all individuals. So part of the skill training that we teach is that when we pick up on someone's having a difficult time, we get comfortable with just simply asking. Now, if I ask you, man, you know, you've been telling me this and this and that, are you thinking of suicide? And if you're not, 99% of the time you're going to go like, no, man, it's crazy. I'm not thinking about that. And it's like, oh, fine. And we kind of move on and we address whether it's a relationship issue or financial problems or just friends or your parents getting along with them or you're worried about someone. And if I still have that gut feeling, I can still come back to it. Okay? But if I don't ask the question to start with, then we miss the boat. And, you know, I'm older than you. I remember a time when nobody talked about cancer because it was almost taboo. So if you had it in your family, you didn't talk about it. Okay? And then a little bit further came along, and I was in my early 20s. My sister got a divorce, and my parents didn't want to talk about that. They didn't want anyone to know that we had divorce in our family. But my thinking is with suicide, if we can get it out of the shadow and just talk about it like it's an everyday thing, and then normalize that this is what people struggle with, how do we address it?
I wanted to also say, because you may mention that they may not tell you, well, I don't agree with that, and I'm going to tell you why. Because oftentimes people will tell you, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to kill myself, but it's almost like the boy who cried wolf. We don't take it seriously sometimes, and I've had people ask me, well, do you think, you know, I should take them seriously? And my response to them is that any conversation about suicide where a person says that they're going to kill themselves, we must take it seriously. They may never suicide, but just an inkling of suicide, if it's on the table, we've got to take it seriously. And I was just at one of the hospitals the other night, and I showed this gentleman this flyer right here, and later on you guys can put it up on the monitor. And lo and behold, he was a minister. And he began to talk to me, and I told him about what I do, and he said, you know, I've thought about suicide many times. I thought about suicide for a whole year.
Wow.
And I'm a minister. And he said, and it took my wife to help me make it through because it was some things I was fighting against. And that's another thing when we talk about religion. Many of us are Christ followers, and some are not. And that's okay. It doesn't matter. But the Bible says that we fight against what? We fight against principalities. We're not just fighting against fleshly things. So there's a lot that's going on in our cognitive processing that can cause us to lean towards suicide. And for him, I was so honored to hear him share that story, because a lot of our clergy will not share that story. And that's why a lot of parishioners are afraid to go to their clergy. I think we had Sheandra Hardy on the show before. She was a suicide survivor, and she talked about that. She didn't want people to think that
And she's an evangelist, right? Or she was?
Yes, she's. I believe she's an evangelist. Yes, sir.
So when it comes down to like suicide, you know, also, you know, this past year, as I've been working on doing different shows, one of the things that I've been noticing a lot is, especially with black men, is how big depression is. And yeah, you know, I was at the barbershop, and I was like, they said, well, can you do a show on depression? Because it's really real for the men. And can either one of you guys, even you?
Well, I was just actually, it's crazy how this came out, because I was just talking to a guy. I've been in the Army for 17 years, so I met a lot of great and cool people. I just found out today that one of my battle buddies died, and he died January 31st, and they just buried him on Friday. And so he died from a stroke, but he was 37 years old, right? So and he had a different living situation, right? It sounds stressful, a divorce that was really ugly, and he had kids with this woman, and it was very, you can understand if you say that if I passed away, then my ex-wife moved right into my house right after I passed away. That says something right there. That says something visually. That says something ugly right that was going on in their marriage. So when you think about a stroke, you think more emotional. You think more turmoil going on inside, not knowing how to deal with it, and it's festering, and you're allowing. He even saw my man that was talking on the phone. His name is Jamil. He saw Jamil at one time and burned out. He left. He saw him. He knew he saw him. Jamil said he knew he saw me, but he left anyway. And they used to talk. You know, whenever they would meet up, they would talk. So you know that something was going on between them two, but they didn't want to talk. And that's one thing that's built inside of us men, i.e. black men, that we haven't grown to show our emotions. We can't communicate effectively with even women or men because we haven't been taught to do so. We haven't given that great example of this is how you do this, son. This is how you talk about this. This is what you look for in women to be able to find that right woman. This is what you look for in the right mentor to be able to mentor you, because it's something that's lost in translation when everybody was locked up in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then, so it was just a lot of things that was going on throughout the course of time that prevented our young black men from growing to be the people that they're supposed to be. And him having a stroke at 37 years old, and so much stuff is emotional. So many diseases are emotional because it triggers different chemicals in our bodies to format in certain ways that we can't control. We can control them. And it's hard for people to understand that we can't control those organisms inside of us just by thinking the right way. And that's why I feel like that stroke that he went through, it was too much emotional conflict going on in his body, and he just shut down.
Well, you know, when I talk to clients, you know, especially with that type of stuff, with strokes, heart attacks, all that kind of stuff, you know, a lot of it is lifestyle, and lifestyle is also i.e. stress, and how you deal with stress.
How you deal with stress is important.
Exactly, and part of being able to deal with stress is being to communicate.
Exactly.
That's what I told my man too. I told him, I said, hey man, throughout the conversation, I said, well, hey, if you need anything, man, just call me. Just call me. A lot of men don't want to answer the phones. After a certain period of time, if you haven't talked to them after, you know, for months and months or whatever, they won't answer the phone.
Yes.
But dude, answer the phone.
Right.
I mean, I'm gonna answer the phone for you. Just call me. If I need you, man, I'm definitely gonna call you.
Right.
Like, keep that door open. You know, we gotta have, like you just said, we have to be able to talk to somebody.
I just think a lot of times men don't feel the need. They feel like they don't want to look vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's because
Exactly.
that's the stereotype.
Emotional.
That's the stereotype or the narrative that's been created for us as a young kids. That you know, you be strong, be a man, and
Men don't cry.
black
That's true.
men don't cry, and all this kind of stuff. But you know, I think the strongest men do cry.
Of course. And I think, like we shared before, it speaks to emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when we have people to dumb themselves down and move away from their emotional intelligence, then we see people who are dying of strokes, who are dying of high blood pressure because they're suppressing and repressing things that are transpiring in their lives, instead of really being able to say, listen, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, and it's okay for me to be where I'm at, but it's not okay for me to be where I'm at and do nothing about it.
You had mentioned the barbershop, and to me, that's a place where I think people just go, and it's almost like the place where you just start talking, and it's non-threatening. For one thing, it's not face-to-face, okay? And for a lot of us guys, this doesn't work, you know? It's just too overpowering. And so this side-by-side thing we see even with the kids growing up, that if you put a couple boys in the same room at different ages, they're going to pull the chairs and do this. And the girls are going to do this, okay? And so the safety of places like the barbershop or the hairdressing shop are the kinds of people I would hope would get trained to look for the signs of depression, to look for the signs for suicide, and for other things, and then to know their community well enough to know how to say, hey man, it's okay. You know, I got someone to talk to if it's okay with you.
And you know what's funny, because I was at a meeting at the Blue Rose Art Bistro in Douglasville on last week, and they had a meeting of the minds, and so many wonderful people were there. And two ladies, they own a hair salon, and I was sharing with them what I do, and they say, please, if you can, come by. We want some of your brochures, and we want this suicide intervention flyer, because we talk to a lot of people, and they have suicidal ideations, or they have issues with communication, stress management, and things like that. And wow, you just hit the nail on the head, because that's true. We spend a lot of times either at work or in the hair salon, at the mall sometimes. But you're right, John, in my opinion, that it's a side-by-side thing, that men, they don't necessarily have to look you in the face to share that, and then when you walk out of that chair, you got that nice cut, and woo, you got a load off your shoulders, you know, and you were able to share it with somebody that's not going to judge you.
So why you feel, either and Tony too, why y'all feel that it's hard for us to have this face-to-face conversation? Why you feel it intimidates us?
I think a little bit of it is just the nature of men and women. The testosterone that we get and the estrogen that they get. That even as little boys, you will notice that they are more tender on an average. Now, again, I'm talking bell curves. So you're going to have that tomboy girl, and you're going to have that boy who can just sit there and rattle and talk and chit-chat and everything, okay? And they're just perfectly normal. But overall, you will find most women are able to do this, to engage, they enjoy that, and in the process of doing that, their anxiety drops. For us males, when we can't figure out what they want from us, our anxiety increases, and we tend to react. Like, what do you want from me? Okay? And we literally, and then we're in trouble. Okay, and we don't even know how we got there. Okay?
Right.
So some of it, I think, is partly that. The other is, again, we have this tendency to accept that little girls are supposed to talk about their feelings. Little boys are, boy, pick yourself up, toughen up. Partly because we know when they get a little bit older, if they go out and they emote their feelings, other little boys are going to go, oh boy, we got one. He's the guy on the bottom.
So my guest from last week, Paul Posey, said you got to see the anger in the person's conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Can y'all speak to that?
Yeah. Again, it's oftentimes the nonverbal. Okay, it's not just the words. It's the nonverbal that goes with it. And they just kind of sit. Women, I think, generally pick up on this much easier, which is why they'll say to me, you're angry. And we'll look at them and go, no, we're not.
Right.
But if you keep talking to me this way, I will be. But yet they are picking up on something that your person that's calling in is indicating, that we tend to send signals out that we're not as aware of. Okay? And it covers a lot of different aspects of our life. I mean, if I go to the doctor and I'm feeling well that day, I don't remember anything to ask them. But I'll go home, my wife will say to me, did you ask about this? Did you ask about, why didn't you talk to them about that?
Right.
You go with me. Here, you go in my place.
I think that one thing that Paul put on there was that you kind of get to see the anger in a person's conversation, and that's true. And he said the barbershop talks. And I guess he's saying in the barbershop talks. Well, guess what? Not only do you get to see their anger, oftentimes men can identify with it. Because I know in the salon, I used to own a salon, so I know what it's like. We can talk and we can say, you know what? He is just a big headache, blah, blah. And then you get somebody else chiming in saying, yeah, girl, I know what you mean, blah, blah, blah. Same thing with men. You know, they can, vent that anger without being in trouble.
True.
And also they can vent it where another guy is sitting next to them and saying, you know what, I can understand that too. But like Johnny was saying earlier, he's a little bit older than you. Sometimes you have the wisdom in the barbershops too.
Right.
And the wisdom, the guy with the wisdom can say, yeah, I went through that too. You know, I've been married 40 years and we still together and this is how I dealt with it. And so they kind of go to the barbershop university, if you will. So they get coping skills sometimes right there in the barbershop. And
Because I met some men They are part of the Nation of Islam, and they have a program called the Peacekeepers. And one of their things is to reach the black men. And they feel that how they reach the black men is go to the barbershops, because most black men now don't really go to church like that. So if you want to connect with them and get to see what they're thinking, how they're feeling, you have to go to the barbershops and have that conversation. So he's like, instead of trying to force people to meet them where they want you to be at, you have to meet the people where they're at.
Exactly.
And I think as coaches, that's one of the gifts that we have to do is meet the people where they're at and bring them up, not be up here and talk down to them.
Exactly.
You got to meet them where they're at and then educate them up. And so that's what I think one of the things too. So how do we, what's like you said, the program you have, it's like an education to teach all of us how to see the signs and what do we do to help try to prevent it. So can you speak on that?
Yes. Part of the program just begins to help you recognize that not all signs of suicide are going to be noticeable, okay? But that usually people are sending signals. And part of it is to understand and just ask, to invite, matter of fact, and say, hey, man, what's going on? And, well, tell me some more. Think you having a rough day today, Antonio? Well, tell me some more. Or I haven't seen you in a year? Hey, man, that's tough. But what else is going on in your life? And in the process, we may pick up some positive things, and we kind of roll with those too. So that by the time we get off the phone, you get out of that little dip of depression or feeling sorry for ourselves, and you recognize there's a little bit more. But if we don't have that conversation or know how to initiate that, but if I do start to pick up on some things that you're really struggling with, then I have to feel comfortable in asking. And then from there, I want you to tell me your story. Well, man, how'd I get like this? What's going on? Tell me more. And I just open the door. My job at that point is really to stay kind of quiet. Sometimes your best friend is the one who never says anything. Okay, it's the one who just listens to you, blah 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 blah, and then afterwards, you feel better.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And if there is that need, then our program starts to move us into what do we need to do to help you reconnect with life, because the death side of suicide tends to focus on there's no hope, there's nothing, it's over. That was then. Okay, and I have failed. I don't measure up. So what we're trying to do is just by virtue of engaging them and talk, you're already making that move.
Right.
Already making that switch to the life side. And the other thing behind our philosophy is we're doing it for what's doable right now. Doesn't mean I fix a person for life. It is first aid to help a person get over the hump or to help get them connected. And part of the connection process is it doesn't mean I go home being the only one that knows. I want to make sure family member may know, a friend may know, a minister may know, someone else that I can engage the larger community. Okay? Just like going to that barber shop is my community. I go in there and I see the same person over and over who cuts my hair, and I usually run into some of the same people there, and we laugh and joke. It becomes a community, particularly at a time when our communities are tending to break down. I mean, I don't know about you, but I remember as a little kid growing up in the city streets of Rochester, New York, and everybody sat on their front porch in the summer.
Yeah.
And we chat with who we're going by and this and that.
Yeah.
Next thing I knew, we moved to the suburbs, and we all sat on our backyard, and I never saw anyone except for the kids my age. Okay?
It's funny you said that because it's funny you said that because my next door neighbor, we've been friends like 30 plus years, and when I first moved to the next door to her, that was our thing. All the kids, we did sit on the front porch. We sit on the front porch and talk and stuff. We play, and if we went outside playing, we sit on the front porch, talking. And now they don't even go outside and play pretty much, let alone sit outside and talk. So like you said, we knew everybody.
Right.
Now I don't think the kids know hardly anybody.
Right. And I also saw where Paul said something about not only listening, that best friend can just listen to you, but also listen to you without
Judgment.
judging
Yeah.
you, and really understand your plight and your hopelessness, because hopelessness is a silent killer. And when we do feel hopeless, and that's what we talked about earlier, about when people suicide and people say, oh, they're selfish, but you just try to feel a sense of hopelessness. Like, let me ask you this: who is the number one person in your life that you feel that you just cannot live without if something happened to them?
My family, my kids, my
Your
wife,
family, your kids. Johnny,
my wife and kids.
For me, it would be my kids and my wife.
your
yeah.
kids.
My parents and my brother.
My mom, my companion, my goddaughter. Now just imagine all the people that we just named
Mm-hmm.
for a minute, that out of the blue, we lost them. They're gone. Like this. We never saw it coming. Just be in that moment. That feeling that you have right now, that's a little inkling of the despair and the hopelessness and the aloneness that someone must be feeling when they experience suicidal ideations.
Mm-hmm. And you know, and to piggyback to the point of the fact when people say it's being selfish, that's another form of being of judgment. Because at the end of the day, we're not. That's their experience. And how can you judge somebody's experience if you have not experienced it?
Exactly.
Understand? You know, that makes sense to you.
Of course. Of
You know,
course.
I think everybody want to pass judgment on somebody's experience, but that's not their experience.
Right, and that's why I said that. Until you feel
Yeah,
that
feel
deep
that
pain
yeah.
and understand their despair, you know, even the viewers, I would ask you, who is it that you love the most other than God and yourself? If they were no more, can you go there for a moment and feel that despair? And now, no one's saying that suicide is right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that. Because suicide is what it is for the person that's suiciding. And I don't stand in judgment of anybody.
Mm-hmm.
My job is to help bring them from the river of suicide and help them walk that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we all can lend a hand,
Yeah.
by not judging them. Because really, we wear our thoughts on our forehead. When we walk up to somebody, if we have any type of religious belief or any personal belief, a lot of times we wear it across our forehead. So when we approach people, that's what they see.
Mm-hmm.
So if they see on my forehead, don't come to me if you contemplating suicide, are they going to come to me?
No.
No. Don't come to me if you cheating on your wife. Are they going to come to me and say, hey, I want to stop cheating. I don't know how. Probably not. Are they going to come to me if I have on my forehead, if your man is beating you, you can't talk to me because I'm going to judge you? They're not going to come to me for that help. And if they could come to me for that one moment and not be judged, it might help them to get out of that deadly situation. So we've really got to watch the signs that we carry around with us, because what we say and how we behave is our calling card.
Okay. Wow. So, is there any more you need to know how to? I know ain't it? That whole little exercise. I'm about to steal that exercise.
I also want to throw in, because you mentioned you were prior military.
Still in, sir.
Okay, so you know that for some of your buds, that if they had to get out because of a medical condition or a physical condition or some whatever reason, and this was their identity, how devastating that is. Okay? And I think it's more so for us males, period. You know, the women, they move from community, and they already have almost a built-in network because maybe of the children or other women, and et cetera. But us guys, we go from one military job to another. We already have the uniform. We
Yes.
already have the job duty. We already have the ranks so people know what they're supposed to do or how to accept us and fit in. And we know even if it stinks, we're going to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, so even if this unit is, you know, like, oh man, I'm out of here. So, you know, I just got to wait that 12 months and I'm
Yeah.
rotating out.
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
can rotate
And that's
it.
right,
Okay.
Johnny. I mean,
Okay.
I'm prior Navy. Nothing
Okay.
against Army guys. Hey,
No,
go Army.
no, my
Yeah.
son's Navy.
So,
Okay.
you know, I get it because what you said is true. You know, I've been overseas for the past 3 years teaching this assist program, and it's very pervasive among military people who are getting out, whether they're being forced out
Yeah.
or whether they're retiring or whether they're saying, I'm done. But it is very different from a female's perspective when we move from command to command.
And then add to that, just in the general population, the kind of jobs that were there for a lot of men who were blue collar, those jobs don't pay. They're not that well to make a living on. And now it's even hard to find one that's 40 hours a week. It's, they want you to work part-time, or you're a contractor, or you're driving an Uber car. And if the relationship goes down, the majority of the time, the children go with the woman, and the man sees himself as an outsider. So in some ways, I never get attached to begin with, okay? Or the woman may not get attached to begin with because at some level, deep down, I have this family history or this relationship with friends and others that sooner or later it's going to happen.
Yes.
Or if it does start to happen, see, everybody was right. So how we keep ourselves centered, how we feel valued, and learn how to value ourselves, even when life treats us badly, whether it's illness, whether it's loss of jobs, whether it's family members have gotten sick or illness, you name the gamut of it. We have to, how do we hang on to something? And again, part of our job with this program that we teach is to try to help people figure out what that is again and how to begin to build over. It's no different than if you have a friend who has just gotten divorced or broken up. You start to chat with them about, yeah, man, it's tough. It's not easy. So how do we get you past this? And if they're really still in love with that person, or they feel like their whole life was wrapped around them, you're going to have that conversation with them not once, but 20 times,
Yeah.
at
Right.
least over multiple months.
This is true.
Okay, and so this is the way it is with depression. We cannot just assume that depression is something that you take a pill and you get over it. It's not. Pills help if the medication is prescribed properly and taken properly and monitored, because what may work for me may not work for you. Okay? So maybe trial and error. But even once we get past that stage, it may be like I'm a diabetic. I may have to stay on insulin the rest of my life. Or you may be a diabetic and you just change your diet and work on that weight and you're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But we
That's
could be
what I believe.
different,
Yeah.
but we're still diabetic.
Right. So I want to transition a little bit to what something you started saying. Go ahead.
I did want to mention, when it comes down to it for me, to get centered, what worked for me was meditation.
We about to talk about that. We about to talk about that. You right on time. You know what to do.
Sure.
You know what to do. So okay. So you talked. We want to talk about mindfulness and being centered and how to stay mindful, even in the midst of a conversation, or like, so if me and Tony is having a disagreement, or he says something to me that kind of irritate me, not allowing what he said affect me. How do the listeners do that?
Well, it takes practice. Lots of practice.
Amen.
Okay, and part of it is our personalities too. Some of us just have bigger than life personalities that we don't know when those boundaries we're crossing them. Okay, we're just, or we're just having fun, and all of a sudden someone's mad, and we don't even really understand why they're mad, or we think it's funny. Okay, but when I recognize, particularly if it's an important relationship, like a friendship, like a love relationship, then I have to start to learn how to settle myself and remember, you're my friend first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that though we may disagree, you're my friend, and there's more to who you are and more to who I am than whatever this disagreement is right now. If we don't, we're going to find we're going to start to avoid each other, or we're going to have fights. And then we have the proverbial, please don't talk about politics or religion next Thanksgiving dinner. Okay? And so I think our whole society is struggling with that divisiveness right now, and trying to remember that the other person across from you can have a different perspective, but it doesn't mean they're an evil person. And so part of that is the mindfulness, the reminding myself continuously. Now, it's done in multiple different ways, some by transcendental meditation, some by just getting out and exercising, okay, or going for a walk. Okay, or fishing, or doing something that brings a little inner peace and calming it down. Some of it may be just playing a game and getting silly with each other. Okay, some of the things I have taught along the way when I've worked in the domestic violence field is literally teaching people to remind themselves and to teach themselves to literally bring up those anxious feelings, and then training their brain to remind themselves that there's more to who I am than whatever is getting triggered inside of me. Because right now you're saying something that sounded like somebody earlier in my life used to say to criticize me. And now, even though you don't mean it or you're just upset, I'm thinking you're after me.
Exactly.
And now I'm snapping back at you. And before you know it, we're off to the races, and we don't even know how we got there.
Yeah, there's so much in relationships.
And in the beginning, you can say, I'm sorry.
Exactly.
But after a few dozen times or a few years of this,
You gotta get to the bottom of this thing, like.
you know, or we just avoid each other, and
Yeah,
before you know
that's
it,
it.
we're roommates.
Yep.
Or someone else is looking for a
Somebody
little
else.
loving, because over here, this person is willing to tell me how wonderful I am, and that's music to my
Yeah,
ears.
right.
I haven't heard that in so long.
Yeah.
I'm
That's so
sorry
true.
I didn't tell you. You're wonderful.
So that's the focus of that. And then in that process, not only to calm myself down, but to recognize that if my partner's upset about something, whoa, is this really about me? And if it is, it's something I need to look at and change. Or is this something about her or my buddy, friend? And right now they're reacting, and my reacting back is not going to help it. So right now I just got to go like, whoa, what else is going on? Tell me more.
It's so hard to catch yourself,
Okay.
man. Those
Oh,
moments, it's so hard to catch
It's
yourself.
incredibly hard.
You know, I tell my wife, like, she was watching me on video one time, she was coming at me or whatever, and I'm just sitting there just breathing. I'm collecting my thoughts. You know, I have to collect my thoughts before I respond, and I want to respond accordingly in the right fashion, that I'm getting my point across, or understanding, telling her that I understand her and her situation, or whatever the case may be, you know, trying to be civil and not come off and with my emotions or what I'm feeling, you know, the reactionary action that people do, and trying to combat the same thing that they're giving you. You want to try to give the same thing back. A lot of people, that's their reaction, you know. And she kind of put off, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm breathing. I'm figuring this thing out. I'm thinking. There's nothing wrong with me thinking and me trying to respond the right way.
But what's even better, if you can have that conversation with her separate at a time when you guys are getting along great, and you teach her what you need,
Yeah, I
and
did.
you ask her to teach you
True.
what she needs,
Exactly.
and then you practice it.
And can y'all specify because a lot of times people want to teach people what they want and not what they need, and the need is more important. Okay, so all y'all can anybody speak on that?
I think it's critically important that we understand our communication styles and we understand our behavioral styles. When we work with people, I don't take on a client unless they take the DISC assessment.
Right.
And the DISC assessment helps to identify what their behavioral style is. Now, I have a degree in psychology as well. But just because I have a degree in psychology does not mean that I'm going to know all the nitty-gritty to who's in front of me.
Right.
So the DISC assessment helps give me the information that I might not otherwise readily have.
Mm-hmm.
And it uses an algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And they ask the same questions over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
but in a different way. And eventually, it's going to put out some results
Mm-hmm.
that we can use. And so I sit down with my client and I go over that DISC assessment and take what might be a little difficult for them to understand, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody's not, they don't have degrees in psychology. Somebody's got degrees in architecture
Mm-hmm.
or what have you. But I show them, this is what this says about you. Does this seem like you? And 9 times out of 10, they say yes, because it is based on a psychological premise.
Now, I know about that one. Now I believe in that one. I told you I'm gonna get certified. No, yeah, I love that. But we talked about the Myers Briggs,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I heard
Yes.
about that, yeah.
and so what's for those who don't know about either one? What's the difference between the Myers Briggs and the DISC assessment?
I don't necessarily know the difference. I just know, when I took mine,
Uh-huh.
I learned a lot about myself, and I found out something that I kind of knew already. But I actually felt special. Like I felt like I felt like I had a superpower. And over the years, as I've evolved, like I've noticed, and just to give you all the 4-letter combination that they gave me INFP, and those people are like who fall into that. We are extremely sensitive, and we feel every little thing. And that was something that I had to realize going into relationships, how not to feel and respond based on the expectation of what the result that I want from my feeling. Because everyone doesn't have these super huge perception pores, as I call them. Everyone doesn't have it. Me, I can notice, I can see what car you drive. And I know it's kind of creepy, right? But I'm just really into detail. I can see what kind of car you drive. And I can be riding down the street and be like, oh, hey, I saw you the other day. Where some people just really live in like a bubble. So I had to realize everyone is not going to be as focused and like detail driven. And that kind of helps me allow people to just like come as they are and like ebb and flow. But I had to learn that about myself. I had to learn that like I'm hypersensitive, and not necessarily in a in the emotional sense, but just like I can pick up on things pretty quickly. And everyone's not really. Some people don't like when you can like I can know something's wrong with you through a text message, which is really hard because they lack inflection, right? But I can know, like I can sense when something's wrong, and that spooks people out because they don't want to feel like everyone wants to feel like that their guard is impenetrable.
Yeah.
Right. But I break it down. Like I break it down like really easily. So I've never done the DISC. I've never done that one. But the Briggs Myers, like it really taught me a lot about myself.
Yeah, because I know we did it as management, and it really taught us how we deal with each other as management.
Of course.
But also, I learned my style and how I use my style to help me and influence my subordinates. And so, and then once, like, when I did it with the other managers, my boss, once he realized he was like a D dominant, and I was more like a S, then he was like, okay, that dominant style doesn't work well with me. And so he had to learn how to meet me where I'm at to get the most out of me. And once he learned that, we got along great. And then I did well because now it was more of an adversarial relationship in the beginning because he's so dominant. I don't do well with dominant people. And so I don't. And so
I tell you, man.
but once we understood that and we worked together on it, it made it great. And I think that's why I think it's very important that you do it. I said I'm gonna get certified on it as well because I did go. I learned that in grad school too, and that's important. Or Myers-Briggs because all those assessments are very good and is needed because it gives you a need of figure out who you are.
Right. And everybody can't administer the Myers-Briggs. you have to be very learned in the Myers-Briggs and the interpretation of the Myers-Briggs. I've taken the Myers-Briggs, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago, so don't ask. But with the DISC assessment, it's a little more, in my opinion, it's a little more easier to use, especially if you are in practice and you are certified in the DISC assessment, because all you really have to do, what I do is I send the link out to my client. They get on in the privacy of their own home. Nobody's standing over their shoulder saying, you know you lying, right? That's not you. You know you be arguing. But in the privacy of their own home, they get on, they take the assessment. And then once they take the assessment, I get a copy of it. They get a copy of it, and then when we meet, we go over it. Now, this is the wonderful thing, and we talked about this before, Kevin and I. It not only gives you the information about your client, but it also delineates to them what each behavioral style is and how to deal with them. So if you having problems with your wife, your significant other, your boss, your teacher, a stranger, when you become familiar with behavioral styles, it gives you a one-up, because it will help you not say some of the bad things or not so nice things that you would say, because you just don't understand behavioral style.
Right.
And it kind of keeps you in your comfort zone, so to speak. Because I think you were talking about earlier, Johnny, how sometimes we say things that we don't need to say. There's a book called The Book on Life, and one of the writers in it said, once your words pass your lips, they are no longer your own. And I think the mindfulness, the DISC assessment, even the Myers-Briggs, and even the meditation, like you said, being still in the moment, helps us not to pass certain words past our lips. And that helps to unify our relationships, too.
Okay, and we're going to see, great way to segue, because one of the things, you know, when usually I had the guys, you know, it's us having conversations about, it's us have conversations about different things, and we always end up talking about relationships. And one of the things that the females would message me about or text me about is saying that, you know, you need a female there when you get the guys on there, because the guys talking all kind of craziness, and we need a female perspective. So since I got you here today on the men's roundtable, we're gonna present some stuff regarding relationships, and we're gonna use y'all's center and mindfulness, and it's part of the reason how we could talk about it. So one of the things that
disclaimer. So I don't profess to be a specialist on men.
Okay.
And I don't profess to know everything out there that the men are thinking or that the ladies are thinking. But I encourage the ladies that's on there that are listening, be sure to chime in. If there's something you want to say, put it on there so we can add it in, because the gentlemen are so gracious and are giving women an opportunity to come and help them understand us better. Right. And I think that's only fair. If you watching a show, make sure to chime in. And I'll convey it. I don't have a problem conveying it.
So
he's nice.
He's laughing.
Way out. Right?
Yeah, he's. I mean, I would actually like to think that this collective, that we are a little bit more diplomatic and egalitarian in our approach. So we know that there's a delicate dance and balance to it. So I'm never in the mode of pointing a finger. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because I mean, we have to work equally together. You know what I mean? Kind of figure out what works best. I'm like you guys sound like so scientific. As weird as I am, like I look up weird stuff like life path numbers and just weird stuff like that. You know what I mean? But I feel like that that it all kind of ties in together. Even though you may not necessarily know the origins of it, certain things do make sense. Right. So I started just finding out different things about myself outside of being an INFP. So if you guys are familiar with your life path number, I know it sounds very topical. I know. But I would look back on certain relationships that I would have with people, and I'd be like, let me just do some little research real quick. And I would find out like, oh, that's why we didn't get along. Like, okay, so for example, I'm a 3. Threes are like the creative forces in the universe. It's really hard for me to like channel my creativity. We were talking about this last night a little bit. So most of the time, even though I'm very aware, my creativeness sometimes it's kind of threatening in a sense, and I'm very very vocal, and I'm very and I communicate well. Most men typically are seen as not being effective communicators.
Right.
So when you communicate well, it throws people off even more.
Right.
Because it almost breeds like an insecurity. So I find myself almost having, not to dumb down in certain encounters, but not reveal so much about, like, I call them my X-Men powers, like my intuitiveness and my creativeness. So I try to dial back because, you know, like, it can be really, right, it could really be like, I've seen people, I remember I was dating a young lady and we were hitting it off and it was really, really cool. And then I said something to her that was almost like prophetic in a sense in her life, and she couldn't handle it. I'm not saying that I was like too much for her, but I think the fact that someone that just met you was able to assess something like that deep in you that you thought that you were hiding. Like I said, it you know what I mean? So I really think like that's my biggest thing. And then I don't know my love languages.
See,
we talked about this last time.
I talked to him. I mentioned to him about this last Tuesday, and his thing was tell her what you said.
I can't even remember. I was like, man, I ain't doing that.
She said, well, he said that if he learned his love language, there's a certain amount of expectation that the woman.
Oh, okay. That is what I said. Okay. What I said. Well, okay. So let me qualify my previous statement. What I was saying was that, okay, for example, and let's see if you guys are with me on this one. If you meet someone, right, and you like them, but you don't necessarily love them yet, or you are just getting to know them, we all know that we can't control what happens in life. Let's say you're talking to someone and that person gets into a car accident, and you just met them, so there's no real bond there, but you like the person. There's a decision in a sense that has to be made. Now you could just jump in the moment and just be Johnny on the spot and be there for the person, but there's a certain expectation that if you are with someone through a traumatic time, that usually brings people closer together. So what I was saying was, as an example, if you're with someone and you say, hey, let's do the love languages assessment, it could infer something more than what you are ready for in the relationship. That's all I
see. And my thing is,
that's all I was
my
saying.
thing is, it's good for any of us to know, because not just in a relationship with the female, but also in life, because as friends, as whoever, you want to know each other's love language, because what I may require for my friendship with these guys might be different from what they may require from me. So if we can't communicate that, I can't be the best friend to you that I'm supposed to be, because I'm not knowing what you need from me to feel the love that you need as my friend. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Chime in.
I hear that exactly. And I think my wife and I went through the love language thing. And she may never, or I may never, meet all of her love needs, okay? But at least I have a better appreciation of what they are. And I try. And if she has a sense or feeling that I'm trying, even though I may be screwing it up royally,
that's more endearing.
That's more endearing.
I understand.
Because she then knows that I'm not intentionally trying to hurt her. We also went through our rocky time. 25 years, we almost went our separate ways, okay? And at a time when we should have been getting closer. But as we journeyed back, one of the things we had to learn to say to each other was a simple phrase: whoa, I'm not the enemy. Because at that moment, she would say something, or I would say something, that would just trigger the other person. And it wasn't like I was intentionally trying to trigger her or to criticize. I just like, whoa, I'm not the enemy. And little phrases like that is what we had to kind of agree ahead of time, that if they were said, it was understood that I'm not intentionally trying to hurt you. I may be, okay, doing it wrong. And I will tell her, I'm sorry, dear, I'm a guy. I just don't get it.
All right.
Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry.
I
Hey,
wanted to
do we
chime
have-
in on something you said
Sure, but
earlier.
sure. No, sure. Go ahead.
You said sometimes, well, oftentimes trauma brings people closer together, and I'm a certified trauma professional, and I don't agree with that, and I'm going to tell you why. Not from I'm a certified trauma professional, but from having had trauma in my own life and being in a relationship, and I'm not used to dealing and depending on anyone, and then for the person to say, you really could wear somebody out. Well, I just want you to, put my socks on because my feet feel like ice. I know it's hot in the house, but my feet feel like ice. Those are things that stay with your mate. So a lot of times when people are going through traumas, we have to be careful what we say to them. And we have to know our love language, because if they're in a traumatic situation and they're coming out and you don't know what they need in that instance, what type of love and care and concern they need, you might miss the boat. I work for a spinal center, and I see a lot of families come there and they have their significant others, they have their children, their moms, their dads there, and the families can't understand why the person who suffered the trauma is so angry. And when they ask me, and only when they ask me, I say, do you really want to know? And they say, yeah, we want to know. Why? Because I can't speak for where I work. I can only speak from what I know, from my educated premise. Because I've been there. I was on a walker several years ago. I was on a cane for 4 months before I came back from Japan. And I had patients that were dependent on me, but I couldn't help them. And people would say, oh, you're going to be okay, blah, blah, blah. And I was angry because you're not walking in my shoes. And it's the same thing with people with traumatic injuries. They hear you, they hear the God factor, they hear all of that. But what they know is that you can get up and walk out of that room and they can't. So there's a whole bunch of things that's going on when people are hurting. And sometimes hurt people hurt people.
And hurt people attract hurt people.
So no, because I'm always over for it. And as you were explaining, when I was replaying what I said in my mind, trauma was not the correct term for me to use. I'm just saying, just for example, just certain, it may not necessarily be like a physical trauma,
but it's a hurt.
But like for example, if you're with someone, if you have two people that are together, but one person feels more than the other person, and the person that feels less wants to part ways. The person that feels more, typically, one of the things that you hear most often in relationships that have endured a long time is, think about all we've been through. That was what I was talking about more so. So certain times gestures tend to bolster certain feelings, because even though it may not necessarily be like something like physically traumatic, it's just something that they remember, and that person was there with them, and it just added a layer to the memories. So it's like, oh man, no, we've been through so much. How could you leave? And I'm just like, well, I mean, we go through things every day. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're married to the overall situation. Right. Just because I was being a good friend, it does not mean that is the grounds or the basis for a romantic relationship.
So I think I'm hearing you say, for you, staying together with a person because of emotional things that may have been emotionally traumatic, if you will, is not the nuts and bolts of a relationship. And I totally agree. You shouldn't just stay with people because you've weathered some storms. You shouldn't stay with people because you have children.
I didn't word it the right way the first time.
Nothing's wrong with people who stay together for whatever reason, but you really have to ask yourself. And I came out of a almost 9-year relationship before I came back to the States, and I ended the relationship. And I went through emotional. I was going through some stuff that only God my higher power, whatever you want to call it, Yahweh could help me through, because I went through the same thing that you just talked about. We've been together so long. We've weathered so many storms. But this was the question I asked myself. And I think this is probably what you asked yourself too. And correct me if I'm wrong. Do I want to spend another 8, 9 years in this relationship where I'm not truly being my total self?
What a bell.
Or do I wanna move on and allow myself to set myself free and give this person enough love so that maybe they can set themselves free? Because guess what? When you're in a relationship and you're not happy, 9 times out of 10, that other person knows it. 9 times out of 10, they're not totally happy themselves. And it's okay, but you got to talk about it and be honest about it. And when you come to the station in life where you say, you know what, I don't want to go on another 8 years or 9 years like this anymore, it's not really about the other person, it's really about you. And you have to be strong enough to say, this is where I'm at, this is about me, and I have to move on. I love you, I'm still in love with you, because that's where I was. I was still in love. There was no infidelity, none of that. I just wasn't there because I wasn't totally always being me. You know, I was with somebody who was like, I turn on the music and I would listen to it loud because I'm deaf practically in one ear. I wear a hearing aid, okay? They didn't like loud music on Saturday mornings. You know,
how do you not like that? That's the way you play it loud.
But what I had to accept them for who they are and where they were in life. And once I was able to do that, to just accept them for who they are, I was able to accept that I could not accept it. And I had to move on. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life. And it hurt me so badly. But it freed me to be who I am.
Because what I'm hearing what you're saying is that people have to, and I tell them this too as well, but you got to be able to accept people for who they are.
Exactly.
And if you can't accept them for who they are, then that means it's time for you to move on.
Exactly.
Because you can't make them be who you want them to be.
Can I add my little saying?
You sure can.
I feel like I've lived my life in a bubble as an only child. So I feel like I've had to come up with a lot of these little sayings that people go to school for. Excuse me if I just come across elementary. But I had to realize that I can't be upset with people because they aren't who I want them to be.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Or who I feel like I need them to be.
Right.
Either. You know what I mean? And like I said, expectations for me are like major. And I think we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the love languages. Like my expectations, you got to be sharp. You got to be sharp. You got to be quick. You can't be a liability. And I realized most people, they just
and I'm with you. But what I had to learn too about expectations is that I have expectations of people, but do I communicate the expectations I have to that person? Because if I don't, I set that person up for failure.
And I think it's also about the frequency that we live on. The frequency that we live on is the frequency that we attract that person by. So you can't, in my opinion, for me, I can't say that I live on this particular frequency, but yet I'm always attracting people that's not on that frequency.
Absolutely.
At some juncture, I'm at this frequency when I'm attracting this person, and then all of a sudden, after all these years, I'm saying I want to be at this frequency, or my concept of that frequency is ebbing and flowing, and when I'm ebbing and flowing, me and that person get together, and then I say, oh, you so nice, I'm going to stay with you. I stay with the person, and then as I'm evolving, and my frequency is changing and I'm cultivating new ways of being, maybe that person is not going with me, or maybe that person is ahead of me. So there may be some clash. So you got to really understand your own frequency that you're operating under, and understand the frequency that they're operating under. Because if you don't, that's going to be a problem too. And I know some people might say, frequency, what are you talking about?
No, it's real.
But,
it's real.
But it's a real thing. And once you learn about frequency and how it plays a part in your life.
It plays a big part in life, in all aspects of your life, because even money is a frequency.
Of course.
You know, anything of material is a frequency. So, like I said to you when I first met you a couple of weeks ago, it's not a coincidence. We on the same frequency level. So it's a matter of time for us to connect. it's no coincidence that I had these guys on my panel because we're on the same frequency level.
Exactly.
You know, and each person, what I respect about them is they know who they are and they okay with they are. You know, so he knows he's the creative guy. He knows he's a little bit different than compared to everybody else, but he's okay with that. And so he's going to attract people of that same frequency that's going to have the same kind of intellect as him, but also is okay with who they are.
Of course. There's a lady, her name is Randy Crawford, I believe. She sings this song, and it's called "It Takes Every Kind of People." And when I hear you speak,
You already know I know
that
Right, that's
is
the
what
music
comes
guy.
to mind. It takes every kind of people to make the world go right, and that's what she says. Every kind of people.
Now,
But
go ahead.
But as I've been listening to this, it's very individualistic, and I also, because I'm a couple's, my whole orientation is systems, which means I'm looking for how does people connect, okay, and so I'm looking at it from what skill sets do people as couples or societies in a bigger whole, but right now as couples, need to learn to be able to recognize that I can give each other enough space to be different and not meet my expectations, but also that we have enough in common, and yet we also still want to be each other's cheerleader. Okay? So even though my wife is different than me, I want the best for her. And if she feels that, even when we're going through a rough patch, we had a better chance of getting through it. Okay? But if I lose that, and all I think about is how she's not where I am, then I'm going to find someone who's going to look better. Okay? Or I'm going to find something that's going to make it look better. And I'm going to, in some way in my mind, whether I mean to or not, I'll justify it whatever which way, but it just wasn't meant to be.
So what if
My experience is that when people get through these patches, that whatever was the stumbling block at one point, a year or two later, isn't. If you listen to the old people, they'll sit there and they still pick at each other. And then they'll laugh. And one of them may even say, "Get out of my kitchen, leave me alone."
Right.
And then they'll laugh about it because they've learned to laugh and not take it personal. Okay? And that's hard, especially in a society where it's so easy
To let go.
to let go and find
Definitely.
someone
It's
else.
When you mentioned the ebb and flow, you mentioned the attracting the right person. I was right there with you. I definitely agree. And it kind of simulates the same thing with you, what you just mentioned, right? So, how do you meet that person, right? So I was like up here, my wife was like right here, right when we met. So, and I consistently, I still kept creeping up, and she was steadily going just like this, cause not necessarily seeing the benefit, right? But then she started to learn. So she started to edge up a little bit. She started to understand it more. But as we were going through it, I was feeling how you just mentioned. Like, why am I with you? And I can't, like, we can't build together. Like, we're not riding together, that type deal, right? So I feel exactly what you were feeling. I felt that kind of sentiment. But then I was like, you know what? My family's not going to be broken up. We're going to build together. Whatever it's going to take. If I can teach you little by little, piece by piece,
Exactly.
and if you can catch it, then that's great. Then we can keep riding together, and I won't have any feelings, any issues with you and your growth pattern. As long as you grow, that's all I request from my significant other, my wife, is that she grow, and that's what any relationship should want within their household, to see that other person grow with them, not because it's all about growth. Life is all about growth. So if you can't grow with me, then we're having problems. But we were having those problems. And it wasn't until I actually said, you know what, I'm gonna be patient with this situation, and we can grow. We can all grow together. And I had kids, and my kids are gonna grow. I have to be patient with them. So I know I have to be patient with. I have to exude patience and understanding with other people and their growth pattern.
right?
And when we grow, I think it's critically important that when we see growth in our partners, we have to shine light on that.
Yes,
Right.
A lot of times
definitely.
we shine light
That's a
on
good point.
all the negative things, but when they are growing, we don't tell them, "Baby, I love you. girl, this why I love you, because right now you doing the dang thing. You going to school. You're a wonderful mom.
Yeah.
You're an excellent wife. Blah blah blah. We got to really shine light on that. Baby, I just love you. I love the way you keep your hair cut. You always smell so good. You really get me going. You get my cognitive juices flowing when we sit down and we have talks. Thank you, baby, for running my bath tonight. When I came in, I was tired. We got to thank
if a woman that said that, I would have married her.
others.
I ain't
So
never-
anyway, we gotta thank our significant others for even the most minute things, because oftentimes it's the smallest things that mean the most to both men and women, same-sex relationship, whatever. Your significant other, all they want to know, well, I don't want to say all, but people want to know they appreciate it.
Right. So one of the things that I mentioned to you and you two before the show started was I had somebody tagged me in a post on Facebook, and the statement was that, you know, African American men were beat down back in slavery. You know, they was beat with the whip in front of their wives and kids, and pretty much taking their power away from them. And then from that point on, the women took the power. And so they were saying that it's now time for the men to step back up and reclaim the power. And so they want to know, how do the men reclaim the power for one, or is it a lot of bitch assness going on?
I look. I'm sorry.
It's gonna be the reason why I point to her is because I'm gonna let y'all talk. The reason why I point to her because when she was here the last time, she spoke about a book that I want everybody to know about, and then let y'all go ahead. I know y'all itching. I know y'all itching, but you go ahead.
The book, and I'm gonna make this quick because you know you're shaking. So the book that we talked about last time was The Making of a Slave by Willie Lynch, and it was a process of how the slave master would take the male figure in the home, and he would bring them out into the courtyard in front of all the other slaves and his family, and he would strip him naked. And I would imagine if we were all stripped naked right now, we'd feel a little vulnerable. Okay. So he was vulnerable. He was stripped almost down to his nothingness, if you look at it from a humanistic prospect.
Absolutely.
But because we know we are spiritual beings having a human experience, he still had spiritual wherewithal within him. But it sent a strong message, because they would beat this individual to within an inch of his life in front of his children. And the wives would then teach the daughters to be strong and the sons to be weak. If you ever read that book, it's a real thin read, but it's a very powerful read, because it has captivated the cognitive process of people of color for many, many years, and has made it hard for us to move away from it. And another book that I talked about was The Sisters of the Yams by Bell Hooks, how we have self-loathing within our own culture
Bell Hooks is
or within our own communities. We don't love ourselves, and this is something I was talking to somebody about the other day. Having lived abroad, many cultures abroad, they love people of color, our style, our swag, if you will. But we don't love ourselves in many instances, because black men talk to black women any kind of way, physically abuse them, verbally abuse them, and emotionally abuse them. And black women do it to black men as well. So if we don't love ourselves here, but everybody around the country see our value, why can't we? I think that's a big part of what we struggle with. And the other thing about taking back our strength starts within. Men, you cannot take anything from a woman when it comes to taking back your strength if you don't already have it inside. True. Because each person has their own individual strength. And if you don't see your own self-value, that's one area of where the lack or feeling inferior starts. I try to encourage people not to get in the push and pull of, I gotta take my self-worth back, I gotta take my control back over you, because what that dictates, the competitive mind. You have a competitive mind within your own relationship, it's never going to succeed. You're telling your wife you're not good enough, or you're telling your wife I have to be over you, and then we use the Bible to say God said man is over women. If you wanted to marry someone that you could be over, then you probably shouldn't have married your wife.
Kill it.
But if you want what the Bible calls a helpmate, someone to walk beside you and not behind you or in front of you, you have to treat them like you want them to walk beside you, hand in hand, on this journey that we call life. And there is no taking of power from that person or them taking power from you. Your power starts inside. And I challenge everybody, if you look deep inside of yourself and find out the core reasons to why you have inferiority complexes, to why you feel like you are not attractive, to why you feel like you are not man or woman enough, or to why you feel like there is any lack in yourself. If you go to the core, it could have been something that happened in adolescence. It could have been something that happened in adulthood. But that's where the strength starts. The strength starts when we do what Michael Jackson said. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. And even though I might not like what I see, you know what? I'm going to deal with it. I tell people, you got to deal with life or life going to deal with you. And the way to deal with life is to start right here. And whatever is bothering you, whatever makes you feel low, deal with it. Because nobody can make you feel low unless you allow them. But that lowness starts from inside. It's already there. So that's my spiel to taking back power. Power in a relationship should be shared. You should be a power couple, not a power individual coming to the table trying to get somebody to be with you so that you can have power over them. And if somebody is not on that same frequency, that's all right, because guess what? You wasn't always on that frequency yourself. You help educate them. You love them. You love them through the rough patches. You talked about 25 years, right? You love them through it. But don't get in the struggle of taking power.
And to remember that they're not there to make you feel good. Your job is there to make them feel that you're the best, in our case, the best man in the world, so that if we disappear, she's never going to find another man like us.
Hey.
Okay? And vice versa.
Exactly.
And that's part of that 5 love language concept and some of the others, is to calm my own fears, my own anxieties down, to learn how to manage those, as well as to continue, even with my kids. Because you know you're gonna, if you got more than one kid, you know you're gonna have one that's easy and one that just, you're banging heads with, and you wonder if they're gonna, spend the rest of their life in jail or some other crazy thing. And yet you don't give up on them. But if you start to form a mental image of them, even if they're trying to do their best, first thing that pops in your mind is, see, I knew you were gonna screw up. Whether it's verbally said or non-verbally. And the same thing happens in the relationship. Okay? See, I knew you really didn't care about me.
Negative reinforcement.
So the stuff that I've worked with has really been focused not on my wife or my kids or anybody else. I'm constantly saying every morning, am I today the man that I said I was going to be? Am I the husband? Am I the father? And there's times when my wife will point out that maybe I'm not being those things, okay? And I have to step back and analyze that, okay? But it also helps that she's able to say that to me in a way that says, I'm not trying to pick a fight with you, okay? I'm just saying this because as I'm observing, I'm not out to get you or to make you feel low. I know you want to be that man.
Right.
Man. So
Stole some thunder, man. I
when you mentioned bell hooks, you like this entire show has really taken me back to my senior year. Because I did an African American women's studies class, and bell hooks was, I learned so much in that class. That was the best C I ever earned, and I was not really like a C student, but it was just like I was just so enamored. Like I learned so much, and I learned, and there was seriously, like in one of the bell hooks books, she said something about seeking beyond the truth. You know what I mean? And I can't remember what that meant. I think that was Sisters of the Yams. Is that book purple? Is that the purple book with the black writing on it?
It's been a while since I've read it.
Okay. But I know we read a couple of bell hooks books.
You'll never forget it.
Right. But when we were talking about Willie Lynch and just the question that you were posing, I think that's almost where we have to start, because Willie Lynch was twofold, because although they would engage in buck breaking is essentially what they would call it, and you would take the biggest, strongest young man, and you would basically rob him of his dignity. You would rape him in front of everyone, or you would tie his limbs to a horse and have him ripped apart or things like that. But the flip side to that coin is that. And I had one of my best friends. She always says that. She says that some of these light-skinned black folk, they light-skinned through slavery. You know what I mean? And I always would laugh because I knew what she was talking about, and that's the other side of Willie Lynch. When you started to see the differences in the tones and how the different tones were treated, especially the women, then you will start to see these different concepts of. What was one of the concepts that evolved? Was it the Sapphire? I think the Sapphire was the young lady. She was biracial. She had the blue eyes. She was usually most of the time maybe assessed with with being the master's seed that he didn't necessarily, but everybody knew. But it was those concepts, and it was those divisive measures that came in on the flip side of the Willie Lynch pamphlet. But I'm bringing that up because it wasn't just the men who lost power. The man also had to imagine sitting up here knowing that your queen is being violated. You know what I mean? Not necessarily just from you feeling helpless and not being able to do anything, but her feeling of having her body violated, and then possibly becoming pregnant and having to carry the baby to term. And you're gonna love the baby. But I'm just saying, like, it was a twofold trauma. So your earlier question with your earlier statement, it's not, when you go back to things like Willie Lynch and like the power that was taken, and like it was like we lost power together. You know what I mean? It wasn't, and I think when we go through it and know that trauma was experienced together, and that we were treated as chattel property together. I think as we evolve into the now, we understand that there's no separation of my experience versus your experience. It's a collective experience. So the responsibility is a collective responsibility. There isn't one thing that I feel like I can do on my own that will really measure up to us getting over it if I don't have my equal, my partner that understands those same things and is going through her understanding, her perception of how that has affected her, whatever it may be. So whenever we try to separate the issues, you can't separate the human condition. I think the human condition is a very fluid state. So when you try to isolate certain things and make it a static state, it doesn't work. And that's what happens when you attach yourselves to things. That's what creates the suffering and the added trauma. But if you understand, like, and I say this a lot too, Bruce Lee said, be like the water. Yes. I understand what Bruce Lee was talking about when he said be like the water. But when we talk about things like, when we talk about how we got to this point, we talk about slavery and different things like that, we always want it to be, this is what it was. But it affected us as a people on so many different levels. It's hard to just pinpoint what we as black men should do to reclaim our power, or what, you know what I mean? Like, we interpret things differently. Like, we're evolving into like a multifaceted people. You know what I mean? So it's not just one particular thing. But we know what we don't want. I think the things that we don't want are a lot more clear than things that we do. And we talk about this in relationships.
Yeah.
What we don't want is really a lot more clear than what you were saying, like trying to figure out like what we need
Right.
to get over this particular hump.
I think some of the ways that men of color regain their power is also to just be that man that Johnny talked about. Be that man that you're aspiring to be.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a good man, if you want to be a good husband, a good son, a good father, take care of your children. Be faithful to your wife. Be faithful to your family. Not just the woman that you marry and the children that you make, but be faithful to your family of origin. There are children maybe within that family of origin, their fathers may not be present. Be faithful to them because they are a part of you. Be faithful on your job. Be that stand-up guy at work so that if you have a younger man that's hustling, trying to make it, he can see you as a beacon of hope and he can make it. And if he's not making it, have the wherewithal to look back and say, hey, how you doing? My name is so-and-so. I've been right where you are. It's okay to identify with the struggle.
Definitely.
Because if you can identify with them, then they're looking at you like, okay, well, maybe he not judging me. He been where I've been, so he understand me. Maybe I can follow his lead. But be that guy on the job. Be that guy out at the restaurant. You know, tip the waiter or waitress fairly. Okay?
For real, for real.
You know, be that guy in every facet because it's really about character. Character is what you do when nobody else is looking. Character is what you do when nobody gonna pay you to be a talk show host. Nobody gonna pay me to work with people and teach them, or Johnny to teach them suicide intervention or communication or stress management or anger management. Character. That's what I would say to our men. If you trying to get some power, take some power, reinstill power, grow some power, you got to grow from within to without. Be that man everywhere you go. There was a song that I heard years ago. These guys in prison made this song. And the guy said, I don't ever want to do anything out in the street that's going to cause me disrespect in my home. So if you take that concept and live by it, anytime I do something in the street, I'm always trying to do something from the love perspective, from a full heart of love to whatever man or woman or child that I come in contact with, from a full heart of love. Because again, like I said, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And if I look at you as a spiritual being, I have to treat you with love because for me, there is no other way. So if you want to gain power, you have to start from the premise of love. And if you start from there, if I tell Johnny I love him, and I constantly remind myself, like Johnny said, I'm going to be less apt to call him all kind of obscenities. If I look at this young man and say, I love you as a spiritual being, I don't have to know you, but I know that you are a spiritual being created in the like image of God. So therefore, there's a reverence that I have to give you because I'm called to a higher frequency when I deal with you. And that's being that guy or that woman.
And it doesn't mean that you don't have the right to call out injustice.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay?
Of course.
You still have the matter of fact, it's appropriate. It's like with our children. I love you, but if you're mistreating your brother or if you're being disrespectful to the neighbor or to anyone else, then it's my responsibility to call attention to that.
Exactly.
Now, how I do that is the question that reflects back on me. Okay? Do I do it in a painful, hurtful way that humiliates the child? Because I felt humiliated by their behavior in front of others, which because the teacher called me or this one or the neighbor or I caught the kid, okay? Or do I do it in a way that teaches the child to say, you know, in our home, we don't do this. And I say this because I want the best for you. And I hope that you see that in me. And if you see me do something, you call me out on it.
Accountability.
Right. And it's funny that you said that because my father and my mother taught us that. And they also taught us to set boundaries and expectations of what we expect how people to treat us. But we also got to treat them the same way. And so they said, including them. So at any point in time, if my parents was disrespectful to us, I can call them to the carpet and set that boundary and say, you've been disrespectful. And you don't get a lot of parents who teach you that, because their mindset is, I'm your parents and I'm always right and I can treat you how I choose to treat you and you can't say anything back. My parents were like, oh no, because we gotta give you respect, just like we want you to give us respect. So at any time you are disrespectful to you, call it to the carpet. But like you said, they looked at it through the eyes of, we all are spiritual beings, so they never gave us a reason to say they've been disrespectful to us. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
And sometimes when we develop certain behaviors, sometimes we get we get blindsided, and this is process called Jaharvi's window. It talks about the 4 continuums of different blind spots and what people know about you and don't know about you and all that. But sometimes we get blindsided and we don't realize sometimes that we're doing it. And that's not making an excuse. That's just the truth. Sometimes we don't. So I love what you said, that your parents allowed you to do that, because it did call them into the knowledge that, hey, mom, dad, this is not cool.
Right. Right.
For me, I would say for the man, it's self-knowledge. It's knowledge of self, knowing who you are, whatever you identify with or who you identify with. It's about knowing who you are and having a vision for your life. I said this before about Dr. Miles Monroe. He's one of the guys that got me over a few humps. Understanding my vision, and your wife is supposed to live through your vision. And if you go into a situation, like I spoke this before, but if you go into a situation like I did with my wife, I didn't have a vision for my life. I just knew I wanted a family, right? And that's pretty much it. I didn't have a vision for what I was gonna. I had a lofty idea, maybe, or in the background, but never really had anything concrete, or so to speak, concrete, that I was working towards. I didn't have that, so I had to apologize to her that I didn't have a vision for us when we got married, and I was like, I had to do that because I had to let her know that this is gonna be a work in progress. This is not something that's this is how this is gonna be forever, because I have a plan and this is where we're going. And we're not going to sit here and stand still. We got something to work towards, so that means we have to change. We have to adjust, and we're going to be adjusting on the fly. So there's going to be things that we're going to go through step by step that we have to grow to, and that's how we have to do this. As far as men, we have to understand where we are and where we want to go,
right,
and develop a plan together collectively on how to get there internally.
Exactly.
And have a place for them to manifest those ideas. Exactly. To grow.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. No, we gotta have a vision. I think a lot of people walk around visionless.
Yes.
And so you have no vision. You just walking aimlessly without knowing where to go. But not only having a vision, but you also gotta be able to set 100% accountability.
Exactly.
And then I think that's where the issue lies in relationships and who we are as people, as individuals, because we don't want to take up accountability of who we are and where we are in our life at this moment. It's easier to pass judgment or place blame on other people for where we're at instead of saying it's my fault. So where I'm at this moment, good, bad, or indifferent, it's all begins with me. Right. So if choices I made or the lack of choices I made, or the actions I take or the lack of action I take.
Right. Fail to plan to fail.
Exactly. And so then therefore, if I don't like where I'm at, I need to change my thoughts and I need to change my actions. But it all begins with me. And I think that's the part that everybody have an issue with, because nobody want to take complete and utter responsibility of their actions. So, and that's including relationships. I never speak badly of the women I dated. Never, because I chose them.
Right.
I chose them, and so they were a reflection of who I was at that moment.
Very mature. It's very mature.
Yes. You know, Oprah Winfrey said that
Shut up.
Maya Angelou told her, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, it's true.
That's
You know.
part of growth. You know, that's
Yeah.
part of growth.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Mr. Santisi, Paul Santisi says that all the time. You don't know what you don't know. He's a very prolific speaker and life coach and all that.
Now, our other brother who's not here, he will easily bring up the fact sometimes that society, you know, creates a demeanor to where it prevents the men from being present in the households due to, you know, incarceration or the fact that, you know, if women have babies and they need assistance, welfare or Section 8, it doesn't allow the men to be present
Yes.
in that, which causes a breakdown in the family.
Yes.
You talked about a song that spoke to that way back, and I know that the Music Man probably would know what you're talking about. But go ahead.
Music Man, no. Okay, so there's a very, very, very great point that you make, because oftentimes I knew this young lady, and I'm not going to call her name because she's a very famous writer. She's a personal friend of mine. And I remember when she was in college trying to finish up her degree, and she was getting government assistance. And she was an honor roll student. She was doing really good, but she was cleaning houses, started her own Pretty in Pink thing, drove trucks, all that. But the better she tried to do for herself, they told her, if you make more money, we're going to cut your stamps, and we're going to cut this, and we're going to cut that. So it was like, what can I do to get ahead? And it reminded me of this old movie. It's a movie from 1974, and the name of the movie was called Claudine. Well, Gladys Knight, she was one of the writers for some of the music on the movie, and she wrote a song called Mr. Welfare. And a part of that says, keep away from me, Mr. Welfare. You know, I have to give up my right, my dignity, just to get this check. You know, they want me to believe, and they telling me that I'm a lazy woman, I don't love my children, and I'm meant to be unfit. I must divorce him, cut all my ties with him, because his ways, they make me sick. And for a long time, I thought she was talking about the man she was dating. She wasn't talking about that. She was talking about Mr. Welfare.
It's a twofold thing with that song too.
So you know the song?
Little bit. Little bit. It's it also is it's a subtle blow to white feminism, because it was so dominant, and that was the narrative that they were promoting. It wasn't a narrative. Now they were allowed to still have their relationships, and this is one of the things about feminism that they don't talk about. They were still able to have their relationships with their men. But when it came to the black women, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that song right there is also a kickback at you telling me that I have to get rid of my roots, you know what I'm saying, my pillar. Nah, I'm not gonna do that. You know what I mean? Exactly. So I'm
you know what I'm talking about.
I know, but back then there weren't a lot of artists that were countering that, because we were deep in the civil rights movement. So feminism was like it was an offset. You know what I mean? So it was like, you know what I mean? It was an offset. So it was like if you were involved in feminism, usually there was a particular look to the women, to the black women that were involved in the feminism movement. And then, you know, of course the complexion and the tone kind of changed over the years, but primarily it was the argument of, nah, we're not going to separate our people.
Right.
And that's one of those things. So I definitely understand the tug of war. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because that's when welfare was first created. It was meant to help the people that didn't look like us. You know what I mean? But then when it was seen that it could be used as a way to corral, and I use that term specifically, because that's what it did. The redlining created the ghettos that corralled us into a particular state. It was easy to apply the concept of removing the man out because you had everybody in a concentrated area. So those people could be targeted. You know, most of the time, the things that we were doing were done out in the open. And like I said, when it's just a concentration of a group of people, it's easy to pick them off.
Of course.
And apply different things that you would like to do. But yes, I appreciate you bringing that up. Though.
Yes. And it's unequivocal what you said about the corralling process. When you are able to corral people in certain areas, you can release different things on them, like chemtrails. I know what chemtrails do? Yeah. Maybe that's another show. We can talk about that. But again, that in and of itself caused a separation, okay, between men and women as well. And it also sent a message to our children. And it set them up for different negative cognitive processes, okay? And one other song that she had on that album, too, was To Be Invisible. If you ever get a chance to listen to the song, and it's called Invisible, pardon me, by Gladys Knight, Invisible, when I hear that, I think about a lot of the people who are suiciding. But when you look back to 1974, the men were oftentimes made to be invisible. And Gladys, in my opinion, in that movie, Claudine, made a very powerful statement on every track she made. And it was a call to action and a call to awareness. And that is the flip side of what he was saying about how they were sending a social message that it's all right for our Caucasian sisters to have their men at home, but it's not right for our African American sisters to have their men at home. Very powerful message.
And that was the effort to break down the family. Like that's when you start to see the rise of the matrifocal nature in the black family and the rise of the big mama and the generational curses of being in the ghetto with the one not even necessarily, I mean, like that one entity.
Because there were some men even back in those days who were single fathers that took care of their children. So, you know, we gotta keep it real. You know, a lot of times we say men run off, they don't take care of their children. Sometimes when you divorce, you know, the woman gets the children. But there were single fathers too that did the job that they needed to do to keep their children intact. So we don't want to forget that either.
The maternal and paternal, the like for example, Georgia's a maternal state. It only developed into a maternal state because of the conditions that were bred to make it a maternal state. Like it had to be that way. If there was a process that was a little bit more equal, or you had the numbers that weren't just once again corralled, or that particular demographic put forth, and you know, to be, you know what I mean? Then it wouldn't be. But it's easy to make, it's easy to build housing projects and kick all the men out and provide the assistance and make everything based on one sex, and then say that the other one ain't worth nothing. It's really easy to do that. So.
Wow. Well, it's been a great conversation. The 2 hours went by extremely fast. Right, see? And we could probably talk to another hour. Before we let y'all go, I want you guys to both tell people how they can find you guys, about your programs, which I got coming up next. So people who are interested, I know there's people joining in, listening. So how can they find you? How can they reach out to y'all? All that kind of good stuff.
If she could put the flyer up, that'd be great. If she has the opportunity to do that. Okay. Would you mind, Johnny, telling them a little bit more about? Just tell them what the ASSIST program is, and then I can tell them what it is.
The ASSIST program is a form of teaching people how to provide first aid, suicide prevention first aid, or intervention, excuse me. So in other words, it's highly individualized to teach you the skills to how to meet with an individual. It's so easy to talk about a society at large or groups of people, okay? But when we're talking suicide, when you want to be able to help the person, you have to look at where the person is. And we're going to teach you basic skills of how to ask the right kind of questions, how to ask about suicide, and then a standardized process that's been taught to over 1 million people in the world of how to go step by step to get them towards the life side and to get them the assistance that they need.
And the way we can be reached, of course, is you can reach us in Douglasville at the Healing and Restoration Center through Lotus Richey Ignites. You can also reach us through Straight Street Ministries, and you can also reach us through Sister Circle of Love and Empowerment. You can reach us by calling 1-800-593-9733. You can also reach us by our website, lotusricheyignites.com. You can email us. You can catch us by pigeon or something. And you can definitely call the show, and our wonderful host here
Yes,
has our
ma'am.
flyers,
Yes.
has our brochures, and they would be delighted to help you reach us. Our dates, we have a workshop coming up on February 23rd and 24th. We have another workshop on the 23rd and 24th of March, April 27th and 28th, June 29th and 30th, and July 27th and 28th. These workshops will be carried on throughout the year. Many companies are contacting us now. Your companies will oftentimes pay for this or reimburse you for this. So if you have a job, if you're in the clergy, if you're a clinician, or if you're just an average, everyday person, especially police officers and teachers, we encourage you to come and join us so you can kind of know the signs and the language. We encourage everybody to come and help us make our world a suicide-safer community. And again, you can reach us at 1-800-593-9733 or at Lotus Richey Ignites.
Before I go to him, do you have a final word outside of this?
Your power starts within. Don't take your flashlight and go outside and look for your power. It's already in your house. It's in your temple.
All right. Music Monk.
Thank you all. I apologize for my initial tardiness, but I'm glad I was able to kind of hop in and roll with the punches. I learned a lot. Thank you all. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you, sir.
My newly found brother. I'm excited about the things that we're definitely working on. If I could just say one thing that I'm going to say is that 10% of life is what happens, and 90% is how you deal with it. And
Right.
I mean, it sounds simple, but it helps you out when that person cuts you off on the way to work. You were ready to blow a head gasket. It helps you when when you're talking, when you're dealing with things at work, when you're dealing with things, excuse me, in community, or just with yourself. You know what I mean? So that's just one of the things one of my mentors told me, and it kind of translates to different things, but just think a little bit. You know what I mean? Before you're so quick to react nowadays.
Yes, sir.
But once again, thank you for having me on the show.
Appreciate you, dude. It's gonna be they're gonna see more of you. So get ready. Tony.
Hey, I say thank you. Thank you guys, Lotus and Johnny. I appreciate you guys coming and sharing your great insights on suicide prevention and just mindfulness and understanding, a person where they are, and things, signs to look for. I know a lot of people in the military need to see that. We talked about that initially. A lot of people in the military need to understand that. So I'm definitely gonna look at your flyer and see what we can do to get you in to where we are. So we can talk to a lot of the soldiers and have a workshop, I guess that's the word, a workshop on the whole situation when it comes down to understanding each other and when there are times of stress and how to deal with them. So I definitely appreciate that, and definitely I always learn something, man, when I come down here, man. I always learn something from you guys.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna get on these shows because it's all about keep pushing, keep learning, and keep helping other people do the same thing. So I really appreciate it, and of course you guys can see me on Instagram, King Antonio B, and Success Atlanta. We have that as well, and find me on Facebook, Antonio Boyd. So shout me out.
Where they can find you at?
Excuse me. You can find me at Music Monk ATL on IG, as well as Music and Motorcycles ATL. And if you type in the hashtag Powered by Music Monk ATL, I'll pop up as well.
Also, they can find me on Instagram too.
IG
Yeah,
pop.
so I gotta see you. Instagram, Lotus Brochet Ignites. Instagram, same thing. Facebook, Lotus Brochet Ignites. Just look us up.
All right. I want to say, first of all, thank you for all the birthday wishes. I truly appreciate it. We talk about frequency. You know, as you elevate your frequency, you know, things going to change. And it's always endless possibilities of what's going to happen to you. So, like he said, I'm excited about what's going to happen with the guys. But from a male perspective, you know, some of the greatest visionaries of men have strong black women behind them. It don't always have to be your wife
That's true.
or your girlfriend. It could be a woman or women who see your vision and wants you to win in that vision. So I want to thank you
Thank you.
because in our connection, I told you my vision
Yes.
and I connected with you. We talked and she has like really pushed it. So there's a lot of things that is going to be happening
Yes.
in this year that I didn't see coming, but through your connection, it's gonna help me out. You're gonna be a part of it, some of them, because I'll tell you off air, and so until
Yes.
and so until it's official, but you will be a part of this.
I'm gracious for the
So
consideration.
I'll tell you off air, but
Details are from Alex.
but I just want to thank you because what I tell you this is that when I was on, they had her on the last time, I told her my vision was to be global, you know, to be international, not with just the show to spread the word of wellness, but also with my coaching and all that kind of stuff. And she took what I said, and when I reached out to her, she called me like this, and she was like, "Okay, I got this for you. You know, are you able to try possibly go to Ghana?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then, you know, I mentioned Japan, and she lived in Japan, so she got people in Japan who's into the wellness arena that could be on my show to help build my platform. So it takes a woman
Actually watched the show.
and it actually watch the show. So there's not
Thank
like
you
they
all
just
for
go off.
tuning in.
So it's not like they just go off her. They actually watch the show and say, "Knew what I bring to the table." So it's like, okay, she hear you, and women, you hear what I'm saying. She heard what my plea was, what I needed, and she said, "Okay, I believe in you, and I'm gonna do my best to help you take it to the next level." And so I said, I'm thankful for that.
Thank you.
So with that being said, this has been the Wellness Architect Show with your boy Kevin Thornton. Be you, be authentic, be great, and we are out. Peace.
Awesome. Wow.
In the world, playing all of
Oh,
today's hits. Listening to Instinct Radio.